Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome. Great to see the numbers go up so quickly. Thank you so much for being here today. Hello, and welcome to all of our alumni and friends of the University of Michigan. My name is Kiara Trotter, and I serve as the Director of Alumni Career and Education for your Alumni Association. I go by pronouns she and her. We are really excited and grateful to have Dr. Rashonda Flint with us today as we explore this month's career topic, the currency of indispensability. Oh my goodness, managing up to get ahead. I am joining you all from Ann Arbor, where it is officially fall and the trees' leaves are changing colors and they're putting on a beautiful show for us. So, for those of you who are elsewhere in the world where the trees don't do that, we can certainly let you know that it's still happening here in Michigan. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This is an interactive webinar that is being recorded, and the recording will be shared in a follow up email. Please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature in your toolbar. And the chat feature is also active. You're welcome to participate in the discussion with other participants throughout the session using the chat. And we'll do our very best to get to all of your questions. We had some amazing questions submitted with your RSVPs, so we're excited to get to those. If for some reason we're not able to answer all of them, we'll do our very best to follow up with you. All right, so now let's get to the main show. I'll tell you a little bit about today's speaker. Dr. Rashonda Flint is a 2010 graduate of the University of Michigan. She got her PhD in 2010, and she has held numerous leadership positions across leading institutions, in her almost 15-year career, including at the University of Michigan. Her diverse portfolio of experiences has allowed her to excel at organizational strategy, and she credits her PhD in pharmacology with helping her constantly employ analytical and problem solving skills throughout the work that she does while regularly embracing failure. She currently serves as a senior strategist and chief of staff within Advocate Health Wake Forest University School of Medicine and is the owner of Aya Leadership Coaching LLC, a strengths based coaching firm that focuses on individual growth and development by centering self reflection and adaptability in their work with clients. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rashonda Flint. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kira. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to cross our fingers. We don't have any technical challenges when I do that. And okay, hoping
You're all
everybody
good.
can my screen. Perfect. So thanks, Kiara. And I'm really appreciative to the Alumni Association. I am in sunny, semi-warm Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So we have a little leaf changing, but definitely not as much as Michigan at this moment. And I'm happy we got a little sun today. So we're still in a warm part of the country right now. But I'm excited to spend time with you all talking about a topic that is so important to me and something I do every single day that I don't think gets enough airtime and conversation. And some people aren't even aware of this concept of managing up. So many of us really do exhibit those qualities and traits to manage up. We just may not know it. And so today we're going to talk about what managing up is and really get into those qualities and how you really continue to harness those skills to become someone that is able to manage up with their leaders, inclusive of their boss. So we have about an hour, and there'll be plenty of time, as Kiara said, for questions throughout and also at the end. And there are questions that were already posted, which I think are exciting, and I appreciate the commentary and conversation ahead of time. We'll definitely get to everything. What I'm hoping for this hour is that you walk away with an increased clarity around the concept of managing up. You also learn a couple of the qualities that make employees really indispensable, and that we will explore some key strategies that can hopefully help you cultivate your relationship with your boss. And that at the end of it, you'll be able to identify possible steps you can take now to really flex what we call your managing up muscles. So we're going to jump right in. So what I like to kind of set the stage with before we get to this idea and concept of managing up is when we hear the word currency, automatically most of us think about money, whether it's dollars, whether it's change. And that definitely is how most of us interact in terms of currency in our everyday life. But if you look in the dictionary at this sort of word and what it's defined at, it's really this idea that something is in circulation for exchange. And Carla Harris actually wrote and talks a lot about this idea of performance currency as well as relationship currency. We're going to talk about the former today, but I encourage you to read her book, check out some of her videos and TED Talks because she does an amazing job really explain how both performance and relationship currency can help you navigate the work world. But for performance currency, it's really the currency that's generated by you delivering the work that was asked of you and beyond. So, when I'm usually coaching clients, we're working through challenges, things they're thinking about, what's happening in the workplace. And inevitably, there's always a conversation that comes up around either performance and or relationship building, and sometimes both. And what we always get to and talk about is this concept of performance currency as well as relationship currency, and how you're depositing and withdrawing into how you perform and how that's currying favor in your work situation. And the idea that when you do great work, you continue to deposit and build up currency and favor with your boss, with other leaders, and with that, you become recognized and known for it. Most of the time, it also leads to promotion, pay increases, things like that. And it can also lead to having a work sponsor. And when we think about the overall impact of performance currency and what that currency is that really leads to good performance and outcomes, is you're trying to make yourself indispensable and building your reputation. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means to be indispensable when you're managing up. So I really love the concept of managing up and thinking about performance currency. One of the things Kira didn't share, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, although I am a Michigan alum and definitely go Blue. But both my parents were accountants, and there were always conversations about finances and money, deposits, withdrawals, and investments. And so for me, I really relate to what that looks like. And also because I went into science, I love data and I love numbers. And so when we think about what's the intent or purpose behind wanting to manage up, for some people, it is the performance angle and wanting to do really good work and be successful. There are also people that tell me, Rashawn, I'm not really interested in that. I'm perfectly happy with the work I do, the pace it's at. I don't need to be recognized. Well, that's okay too. There are some other whys that come into play. So, Gallup World Poll typically does polls many times a year, and they really get a pulse or a sense on the workplace globally, but specifically in the US, we're going to look at. And when they look at employees and their intent to leave an organization or company, and they define that as to the extent you're currently looking for a different job than the one you have now, whether it's internal or external. And they recognize that 1 in 2 employees is really looking for that next opportunity. And with that, they also recognize that the primary reasons that employees cite for voluntarily leaving their company outside of pay, so if we put pay aside, we are talking about advancement, the development or career opportunities, and either their direct supervisor, manager, or their senior leader really contributed to them wanting to leave. And so, in addition to this idea that, okay, There's reasons about performance that we want to be successful. There are also reasons that make us want to leave. What's incredibly sort of startling is when there's been studies done about what employees cite as the biggest impact and driver on their mental health. The highest rated, top rated thing are managers. And it's equivalent to the impact that your partner or your spouse has on your mental health, and it's a greater impact than your doctor, even your therapist can have on your mental health. So you could be saying, Rashonda, I'm not interested in performance, success, going above and beyond, but you may care about your own well-being and happiness and health and satisfaction in your role. So whether it's the career potential, whether it's your own well-being or another reason altogether, we're going to talk about managing up and how that can really help you. Now, I recognize that some of you are familiar with the concept of managing up, and for others, it's a completely new thing. As I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about what it is and some of those qualities that really lead to mastering managing up. Now, Harvard Business Review defines managing up as really being the most effective employee you can be. And what you're really aiming for is giving credibility and value to you, your work, your boss, and your company. Now, notice the first thing they say is the most effective employee that you can be. So that's your first purpose. It's about you. And it's also about the value you bring to both your boss and the company. And this isn't just for people that are starting in a new company, starting in a new role, or have a new boss. Even folks that are seasoned in their roles, have the same boss, have been at the same organization, can really take away insights about how to manage up and do their job better for many different reasons. And while managing up is about intentionally developing and harnessing strengths and talents in a way to help you thrive and help your boss and the company thrive, it really is something that you have to put intention into, even though you may be doing many of these same qualities. And there are also things you have to recognize that are not managing up, right? We're not sitting here saying you need to be best friends with your boss. We're not sitting here saying that you have to be in a toxic workplace. We're not saying that you have to agree with everything your boss says. But Kiera does a really good job of sharing a short article this summer of summing up what managing up is and what it's not. So I encourage everyone to take a look at that. Now, so we think about the benefits of managing up. Why does it matter? Why do we even want to take time to think about it? The first one, better performance. So we know that when there are shared expectations and understanding between you and your boss, you're very clear about priorities and goals, and it leads to better performance for you, for your team, and for everyone involved. The other thing we know is that everybody is interested in their personal development for whatever reason. And when you have that alignment with your boss and you're able to get their perspective, understand their concerns, learn from them in different ways, good, bad, or indifferent, it really helps you personally develop. And managing up really lends itself to having enhanced communication. One of the things that people are always talking about is this idea of communication and communication gaps and how there is an open, transparent, honest communication. And what managing up really does is helps people think about how you foster different skills to have conversations with your boss and be a part of teams in a way that authentically allows you to communicate in different ways. And then the last benefit that I'll highlight is really improved engagement. We know that if you are feeling happy, you have good performance, you have that good relationship with your boss, there's improved engagement and motivation to do well and to help your team do well. Now, before we get into the details of managing up, I'm going to share a little bit more about me beyond what Kiara shared. So, I'm definitely a scientist through and through, which is where a lot of my analytical and problem solving skills come from. And in addition to getting my PhD here in neuropharmacology, I also have a bachelor's degree in chemistry. And so I've always had a love for science, asking questions, experimenting, doing things differently. I've spent most of my career as a higher education leader at different institutions, including a stint at the University of Michigan. And I've really enjoyed the time I've spent with leaders and with teams and the work to really help improve and impact our society and organizations and students and organizational structures across the board. And the other thing here I mentioned is I am a certified leadership coach, which is really fun for me. Outside of my day job, I get to spend time with my coaching business, IA Leadership Coaching, really working with clients. And I have this philosophy that, you really need to nurture and foster your own strengths. And you have all the answers within inside you. And it's really a relationship where we're sort of helping you expose what those strengths are and what makes you great. And so I love the concept so much that I'm even also certified as a Gallup strengths coach to really help people think about their strengths and how they drive them professionally and personally. But my day job has me doing lots of strategy and organizational development as a senior strategist and chief of staff in a large healthcare enterprise. And so I get to spend a lot of time with leaders, and I really get to flex my managing up muscles on a really regular basis as we figure out how we think out of the box to solve problems, engage, and interact to make our organization better for patients, teammates, faculty, and all the like. So, as promised, we're now going to jump into managing up and what some of those qualities are. Keeping in mind, there are so many qualities that we could go through. We only have an hour, so I'm highlighting my top 6, but know that there are many, many more qualities that you can really build on as you're working on managing up. So I mentioned that I really do love the coaching work I do. And one of the things that I typically employ is reflective coaching, where you really reflect on what you do, how you do it, as you gain insights about yourself. So, what we're going to do while we go through and think about all these qualities, I'm going to ask you all to do some reflection as well. So, how this works is I'm going to read a statement, and on a scale from 1 to 4, with 1 equaling never and 4 equaling always, I want you to rate yourself on the statement that I read. And we're not keeping score. Nobody's looking at your rating but you. So be completely honest when you think about these things. Okay. So the first question, first statement, I observe and assess my boss's strengths and weaknesses. So I'm going to give you a minute just to kind of think about that. Do you feel like you understand your boss's strengths and weaknesses? You feel like, yeah, I'm close to a 4. Or you feel like, no, I have no idea what my boss's strengths and weaknesses are, and I'm more on that 1. Are you a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4? You can even do half numbers if you want to.
Rashonda, we have a few people who are sharing their ratings in the chat. Please
Ooh,
know you don't have to do that if you don't want to.
yes, but
Um,
I love it. What do we have
we
here?
have a range. So we have a lot of 3.5s, 3s, and 4s, but we also have some 1s and some 2s, 2.5s. But it looks like people are skewing more towards 3s and 4s.
Oh, I love it. Okay. So for those of y'all that said, oh, I'm a 4, I'm a 3.5, that's great. What that means is you may already be managing up and you just don't quite know it yet. We're going to get into that. Or you may be closer to that 1 and you're like, I have no idea what those strengths and weaknesses are in my boss and may not even care. But that's okay too, because it gives us somewhere to start. So it jumps me into our first quality, which is awareness and observation. I love all of these qualities, and I've actually bookended my two favorites. The first one being awareness and observation. As a scientist, I love the concept of paying attention to your surroundings and observing and using it to really make decisions. And so, with this concept of awareness and observation as a quality, you're really wanting to get to know your leader. What's their work style? What's their communication style? How do they like information? Are they working late into the night, early in the morning? Do they think best in midday, or are they better first thing in the morning? Do they read the emails you send, or do they just skim them? Also, get to understand their priorities. What do they think are the top things you should be working on, your team should be working on? And start to get a sense of their needs. Where are the gap areas that you can help fill in? What are those things that keep them up at night, things that they're working to address within the team or within the organization? And the last thing I'll share is pay attention to the questions they ask. When you're presenting or debriefing them, when other team members are, you'll notice that your leader typically asks very similar questions. I had a leader once who was completely focused on research, loved research, research scientist. So I knew if somebody was presenting and there was data, this person was going to drill all into the data, ask lots of questions about the data, want to make sure the data is validated. And sometimes you get stuck and lost in it. And so it tells you, though, what that leader is interested in and how you present things to them, particularly as you try to think about solutions and work that you want to do. Now, all of these things can be very complex, the idea of awareness, observations, but it can also be very simple and very simple things. So I'm going to tell you my current leader, who I have a great relationship with. She's one of those folks that gets hangry. And I know there are people like that. I'm not one of them. I'm one of those people that I'll get my first meal at 2 o'clock and I'm probably just grabbing something in between. There aren't scheduled lunch hours, things like that. But my leader, she's typically hangry. And what my colleague and I noticed is that right around that lunch hour, if we had meetings, which we often did because people scheduled through the lunch hour, it was harder to get decisions out of her. It was harder to get her to focus on what we needed to get done. And if we had to be in meetings with other people, it was a rough meeting to get through. And what my colleague and I started doing was we sort of slid things on her desk, whether it was a granola bar, a cup of soup, whatever that looked like, so that she at least had something to eat. And we were able to avoid the hangry and the sort of lack of decision making that we needed done. And people will tell me, like, I'm not buying my boss anything. That's fine. I'm not saying you need to. But what I'm saying is this small act of just making sure she had something to eat, she was good, particularly as we were running through meetings, helped my colleague and I more than anything because we were able to get decisions done. We were able to move forward with things and get her thoughts. And if we were in meetings with other folks, it made the meetings go so much better. So, what is it as you're observing and becoming aware of your leader that you notice? And how can that help you as you think about a great relationship and how you foster that? All right, so statement number two on the same scale, 1 to 4. What are your thoughts about the following? I give my boss positive feedback about our work achievements. What does that look like for you? You regularly, provide them feedback that, the work y'all are doing is great or it landed well, or you appreciate their insights or thoughts, or have you not really thought about it? And it's okay either way. Kira, what we got in the chat?
Yeah, so these are coming in, and it looks like we don't have as much confidence in this one yet. So I'm excited to see what you have to say here. We have more twos,
Okay.
and a few more threes, not as many fours as the last one.
Okay. Okay. good. That gives us something to work on as well. So that number 2 quality, you may have guessed it, it's relationship building. And it's one of our favorites, not favorites, depending on, your style, your approach. Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? But in order to manage up really well, you have to work on this relationship building, particularly with your boss. It's really about getting to know who your boss is, understanding their values, how they think about work and prioritize work, what their career paths or interests are. And you should feel free to share yours as well. One of the things I think is always harder for folks is to really think about celebrating, those successes or those little wins and giving positive feedback to your boss in the same way that you hope you get positive feedback. Because our bosses need reinforcement too to know that they're doing great things or that, the idea that they had and the help they gave you on a project you really appreciated. They need that same type of feedback that you think about. And trust me, I'm not saying you need to be best friends with your boss. Do not take away. Rashonda said, I need to build a relationship and be a best friend with my boss. Absolutely not what we're saying. But what I am saying is what you want to think about is how you really build a positive connection. So get to know your boss and let them get to know you a little. Now, headed into this third quality, the statement that I want everyone to think about. I am flexible, but I also know when to stand my ground. This one's a little tricky sometimes. Are you set and determined to go down a path once you begin? Are you able to adjust? And remember, nobody's keeping score. You don't have to put it in the chat. You can just think about it. So, but think and be honest with yourself about that one. How are folks feeling about that one, Kiera?
I love this one because we got our first 2.75.
All
So
right.
love
Yes.
that. And similar to the last one, we're not seeing as many fours. We're more in the high twos up to mid threes.
Okay, good. We got some work. Okay, that's great. So that leads us to this number 3 quality, adaptability. How are you really adjusting? How are you really being adaptable to the things that come your way, but also the things that are coming your team's way or your boss's way? And so to really adapt in different ways, you have to understand what your boss is working towards in terms of those priorities and goals and what they want to achieve. And then you really want to be able to be of help when you can, when there are changes that are happening or your boss is under pressure. And that could look like a number of things. That could look like you offer to help with a project that they're working on and they've got a hard deadline and there's so much to get done. It could look like you taking something off their plate that you can handle so that they can focus on the thing that only they can handle. But really being strategic about how you offer help and help them work through and adapt to the changing dynamics and landscape as things come about, which we know will happen. And then the other thing that I'll share that people don't think about often is what are you working on in terms of learning skills that you're interested in that could also benefit the team, right? We think about professional development and we think, okay, what are you interested in? What are your passions? What do I want to work on? And how can it benefit your team and how can you pitch it in different ways so that you can really leverage that skill within your team? When I was growing up, as I said, both of my parents are accountants. And when I was probably in elementary school, my father went back to school and learned how to do computer programming and code in different languages, which was really unheard of at the time. And I thought it was so cool. He used to come teach classes in my elementary school. And it also led to my sister double majoring in computer science and math because there's so many intertwined connections between math and computers and programming and all of those things. But what I loved about that was he took his passions, his interests, and he tried something new that was ahead of the time. And so what is that thing that you're interested in learning that may be ahead of the time or really can put you out in front? Could be AI, could be something else. But think about it and what can you really do to learn that could be a benefit to your team? Now, the fourth statement, same scale, 1 to 4. I summarize actions agreed upon with my boss. So if you're having a conversation with your boss, whether it's a team meeting, a one on one meeting, y'all are in another meeting, how are you making sure that you've captured everything that needs to get done and summarizing that back to make sure you understood it correctly and there's clarity in deadlines and deliverables and intentionality? What we got on this one, Kiara?
I keep getting caught up in the learning, so let me look at the chat. So we have some twos and threes with this one, but also some comments. Definitely could do this one better. Less is more. Um, yeah, so it looks like we're kind of in the middle with this one.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for whoever, shared that they could do this more. I completely agree with that. I think for me, I'm always in such a hurry writing down everything I need to, and I have my own list and my own mechanisms. I don't even think about repeating it back or making sure I understood or that we've assigned who's going to do what. And so I could definitely do this one more myself. And this one leads us to our fourth quality, communication. It really starts with listening. We hear a lot when, we folks talk about arguments, this idea that listen to hear instead of to respond. The same is true in work relationships. You're really listening to understand your boss's perspectives and their concerns so that you can do your job better as well, and making sure that when it needs to be shared, you're communicating the challenges and different barriers that you may be coming up against, but that you're also seeking feedback and guidance. One of the things that I think people struggle with is feedback, both how to give it and how to receive it. So really coaching your boss to coach you. And it's something that all bosses, all leaders weren't trained to be leaders, and they don't necessarily know what they should ask you about your development or your interests or what you want to work on. So do a little bit of coaching with them to share with them how you are interested in being a part of the organization or what skills you're looking to develop, and make sure you keep those communication lines really open throughout. Now, the next statement that I'm going to read, same for four scale. I make sure my boss knows about any problems before anyone else. And I'm going to let us pause on that one for a second and think about it, because I don't know about you all, but I'm always trying to fix a problem before I need to tell my boss something went wrong. But I'm curious what the chat has. Kiara.
All right, so we have quite a few threes on this one, but also twos and 2.5s. I don't think I've seen a four
Okay.
yet.
Okay.
But I love this one. This one might be my bookend favorite.
Yes, no, I appreciate it and love, yes, some of the threes on this one, because I know, I am still my own work in progress in this, and I'm gonna always try to figure something out before I need to tell my boss that we got to work on things. But it brings us to our fifth quality, which is proactive. And it's really about focusing on how you can proactively share information, receive information, learn things, and be of use to your boss, your team, and your organization. So, one of the things that I always remind people that sounds really easy, and people are like, yep, I focus on solutions. We all get kind of caught up in venting about what exists, the status quo, or we're frustrated by some process or thing. And instead, think about how you can present different options to update it or change it. Instead of getting caught up in those frustrations, try to channel that into solutions that you can really share with your boss as a way to kind of proactively get ahead of some of the things. The other thing, reach out to your boss and get help or clarity. If you forget at the end of that meeting to kind of agree on the deliverables and kind of summarize what it is y'all talked about, reach back out if you need help or clarity. Now, I will say some people don't feel that way in terms of a trusted relationship with their boss to do that. And that's perfectly okay. find that trusted colleague that you can get help and clarity from, because that's also proactive and it's showing really how you're taking and adapting to circumstances and learning and leaning on others for help proactively instead of waiting until the last minute or not having all the information you need. The last thing I'll say around being proactive is really step up to support work priorities as you have time. May not be assigned to you. It may not be something that, you're regularly working on, but if you see in a team meeting or something your boss shares that's a real priority and you've got time to work on it and are able to jump in, lend a hand. That really helps when you're thinking about that performance currency as well as how you manage up and learn what those priorities are. So, this last statement, this is probably actually my favorite. In the last year, I have taken on a new project or proposed a new idea and it failed. So, I'm going to give you a minute for this one. Really ask yourself if you've done something different or new and it failed. And so, let's finish strong. Let's be honest. And you don't have to put it in the chat if you don't want to. But, Kiara, what are we seeing in the chat about this one?
Okay, these are coming a lot slower than the last ones, y'all. But we have a few ones, some twos, a four, a five with a smiley face. Love that
Oh,
one. And some threes. So, and a 1.5. Let's bring the 1.5
okay.
in here too.
Okay, I love it. I need to learn more about this five with the smiley face, but no, I love the honesty in this one. This leads me to our sixth and final quality for today, which I like to call scientific inquiry. For me as a scientist, I feel like I've spent my entire life using this one and thinking about this one. And it's really the essence of who I try to be as a leader and a performer and all of those things. So I'm going to take everybody back to their science days for those that, can't really remember what scientific inquiry is. It really is thinking about problem solving and questioning, and you're using knowledge you already have, you're using deductive reasoning, you're using evidence, you're asking questions to really come up with solutions. And so, what I love about this quality of scientific inquiry, it encourages us to do things that we naturally sometimes feel uncomfortable with at first when it comes to our work, really embracing new things. So, ask yourself, have you experimented lately to try something different, right? I had a coaching client once, and most people say, like, okay, what are the things that keep you up at night? She shared something she heard, which was, what are the things that piss you off at work? And I really loved it because it's really, what are those things that you're like, why do we still do it this way? Or this makes no sense, but we keep doing it. And so, what I encourage you to do or think about or look for ways to experiment and do something different. Try a different approach or way to do things. The other thing, tap into your creative juices and energy to try to solve a problem in a different way. You'll find it's fun. And typically, you pull in different people that you may not regularly engage with, and you learn new skills along the way. And the last thing, which I'll always say, we typically celebrate achievements, and we also need to equally get good at embracing failures and those things that don't work and learning from them. And that's where that adaptability quality comes in, because you pivot, you rebound from it, and you learn and you move forward and you're better for it. So, taking that time to embrace those failures is something that I really encourage people to do where they can. And it doesn't have to be big at all. It can be very small, low risk things to start as you work your way up to big. But the idea is try to embrace failure and what you can learn from it. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't also highlight a few things to watch out for when you're managing up, right? Because there are so many great things and so many benefits that we've highlighted about managing up, but you got to be careful of a couple things. The first one is overstepping your boundaries. Yes, you are working on building that relationship with your boss. Yes, you are learning about them, what they like. You're learning about your team. But proceed with caution when it comes to how much you share, and make sure you're comfortable with what you share and what that information is. And sometimes you kind of forget, right? I had a boss once who had a great relationship with, and it was many years ago. And during the time I was with this organization, my mother passed away unexpectedly. And when I came back to work, I remember sharing that, I was kind of uncertain about if I was going to stay in this company because it was completely on the opposite side of the country from where my father was, who is now, this widowed man that has been his entire life with my mom. And, I would share that I really needed to think about it and I wanted to make sure he was going to be okay and all of these different things. Well, 6 months later, there was an opportunity for promotion that came up. And I was really excited about it and thought that it was going to be, something that I could be, promoted to, that it would be just, yep, obviously Rashonda would be perfect for that role. And I wasn't chosen. And I remember asking my boss later about it. And she said, well, I thought you were leaving. And I didn't think you were, wanting to do that anymore and wanting to stay. And it reminded me, as much as I will always have good relationships where I can with all of my bosses and leadership, I have to have clear boundaries. And I have to be clear about what I say, how I say it, and when I say it. So that's one of my cautionary tales when it comes to managing. The other thing everyone should think about is perceived manipulation. We've all said, okay, this person is clearly trying to suck up to the boss, right? This person is the one that always has the eye rolls and it's always like, oh, is this person really talking again? Now, we're not saying that you need to agree with everything your boss says. But whatever you do in terms of engaging with your boss, trying to learn about your boss, sharing with your boss, building that relationship, make sure you have the right intentions and make sure that it's authentic when you go about developing this relationship because it will show if it's not for the right reason. So make sure that how you maneuver and how you think about managing up is in a way that's authentic to you. The other sort of pitfall that you want to watch out for is singular dependency. This idea that, okay, I'm going to put all my efforts into managing up with my boss. I'm going to learn everything about my boss, their goals, their priorities, what they want, what they're interested in, their next step, how people say, don't hitch your wagon to one horse, that type of thing. And it's great that you're doing all of that, but make sure you're also paying attention to the larger organization and leaders throughout the organization because you never want to be solely dependent on anyone but yourself and your skills and talents. So make sure you're showcasing your skills and talents with your boss as you're managing up, but also to other leaders in different ways. And that last pitfall, kind of keep an eye on when you're thinking about managing up is goal misalignment. Really understanding your boss's goals and priorities is so important. But when we go back to that quality of observation and awareness, make sure you're observing what other leaders' goals and priorities are, what the organizational goals and priorities are, what folks are talking about across the organization and what they're working on. So you're ensuring that you're aligned with the entire organization and not just your boss. So now we get to the fun part. We've talked about what managing up is, and we've discussed some of those qualities and ways you can go about managing up. Now, I'm not trying to say, okay, now tomorrow start boiling the ocean. Do everything all at once. Absolutely not. This takes time and it's a delicate balance of building up muscle memory and working towards it. So I'm going to give you a couple of things to think about as you begin this journey, restart this journey, or continue the journey of managing up with your boss. So the first one I love to share with folks is assess yourself. There's a resource that I'll share at the end that Kiara and team will also be able to share with you all that goes into a lot more statements than the ones I had. and rate yourself using the full assessment and be honest. Be honest with yourself as you kind of take a look. Am I falling mainly in that one and never doing these things? Do I have a couple fours that I'm doing really well? And pick one that you scored high in and one you scored low in. So that one you scored really high in, continue to think about how you build more muscle memory with it and flex it and showcase how you're managing up in that way. And that one you scored low in that you want to start working on, start there and think about ways that you can already work to change habits, behaviors, do things different. But you start small and then work your way up from there. The second thing that I want to share is this idea of studying your boss. You really want to learn your boss's priorities, their expectations, their style, their approach, what their concerns are, and all of the like. It will help you and benefit you tremendously in this concept and journey you're on to manage up, really understanding your boss a little bit better. Another suggestion as you're working to study your boss is switch up your one on ones with them. Leverage what you've learned when you study them to really maximize time and effectiveness. So, for example, if you know they never read an agenda that you send out, doesn't mean you don't send it out and highlight all the things you're working on, but then maybe you take one or two and ask some thoughtful questions to engage them and get their feedback. Or let's say your boss loves sunshine or loves getting all their steps in a day. Suggest a walking meeting. Switch things up a little bit. Try something different and see if it can help you get different results when you're trying to build that relationship. And then this last concept of really test your zone and move out of your comfort zone. So education and, even development really looks at this idea of starting in your comfort zone and moving into your fear zone to eventually get past it into your learning and growth zone. And I encourage folks to do the same thing. Maybe uncomfortable when you start, but how do you try new ideas? Try to be creative, innovative, embrace failure in different ways. And then the resources. So, as I mentioned, Kiera and team will have access to all of these, but there are a couple things that I mentioned throughout my talk that I want to share with you all so that you have some tools as you think about managing up and what that looks like and how you get started. And then with that, I want to say thank you so much. Thank you for the engagement. I'm excited to kind of hear what's in the chat and what questions are coming up. But I definitely, if you have never had a coach or never explored coaching, I encourage you to do that. I had some amazing coaches when I was at the University of Michigan, and I was trained there as well with some exceptionally talented people. And so I encourage everyone to explore that as an option as you're really trying to figure out who you are and how you manage up to get ahead. But with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much. Rashonda, we do have a request for you to show the resources page again and to repeat the things to watch out for when managing up. Just so everyone knows, we will be sharing the recording of today's webinar with all of you, anyone who registered for the webinar tomorrow. So if you're not able to catch everything right now, you'll be able to catch it later. And we will also send you a resource guide with that follow up so that you can click on all of the links that Rashonda has on the screen.
Yes.
Okay, so we do have some questions coming in. The first one is in the chat. Thank you for taking time out of your day to guide us through this information, Dr. Flint. My question focuses on disagreements with your boss. What are your recommendations to approach these situations?
Thank you for that question. I think it happens to all of us, right? There's never a situation where you've never not had a disagreement. And I think it's how you handle it and how you approach it. Um, there also, when we think about both performance currency and the concept of relationship currency, the more you've built into taking time to build a relationship with your boss, the easier it becomes to have disagreements and to share concerns in productive ways because it gets into this idea of feedback. and being able to give feedback and also receive feedback in different ways. And it's something that, there's no right time, right way. It's all person dependent, like I said, on the relationship you've built, how comfortable you feel. But if you're not quite there yet, work on the steps to build relationship with your boss, thinking about how you communicate, thinking about how they like feedback and how they've responded to feedback in different ways. And, start to share different tidbits or insights you have and see how they react to it. So that way, when disagreements come, you know how they handle them and how you're able to approach it. The other thing that I'll share is that sometimes you can just ask your boss, what is your work style? What is your communication style? How do you like to handle disagreement? And for some people, they're very clear about that and they can tell you. But sometimes people don't even know their own styles. And so in that case, you may do a little more observation, awareness, that first quality of managing up. But if they know, it saves you some time and you can work in that space as you navigate disagreement. Yeah.
Thank you. These are coming in fast and furious. So for the next one, I'm going to combine two questions because they seem to be related. Any tips on a boss who isn't particularly accessible? And then the other question is, how do you handle when your boss keeps moving or canceling your one-on-ones?
Oh, yes. I love both of those questions. Thank you for both of those questions. One of the things when, I shared how you think about, your one-on-ones and switching things up. Accessibility is a key. There are bosses that are so busy or they have so much going on, they don't necessarily realize that they're not prioritizing the team or individual employees. And so you may have to adjust, suggest the different times that you could meet. Notice when your boss is better in the spirit where there aren't fires that happen or pop up. So if it's first thing in the morning, for example, if you have a boss that's always putting out fires and there's always something happening, maybe it's early morning that's best. Or some bosses, they're a little bit later. Maybe that's the best time to get things done and you can flex your schedule a little bit and stay later to engage with them. But I think accessibility is it's something that we all kind of fight with, particularly as leaders, and how we spend our time and what we spend our time on. And sometimes, quite honestly, they may think you're okay. They may think you don't need that one-on-one, or you're not really, you're doing really well and it's okay if we cancel it. And that's where that communication comes in and sharing why the one-on-one is so important to you and how it's helpful to you and how much you appreciate it so that they begin to prioritize it in the same way that you would like it prioritized. Yeah.
That's great. And these questions are absolutely wonderful. Everyone, thank you for these great questions. We're going to get to as many of them as we can. The next one is in the chat. How do you reconcile the recommendation to take on additional tasks without receiving additional compensation? At what point should managing up be stopped if results aren't being seen?
Ooh,
Oof,
yeah, I know. Woo.
that's a good one.
Right? That's a really good one. By no means do I ever want to go on record and say you should just do all kinds of work that is outside of your scope that you're not getting paid to do, right? Like that's absolutely not what we're saying. What we are saying though is everybody's work has ebbs and flows or times where you can make choices about the projects you work on or the things you take on. And when there's opportunity and it's something of interest, see if you can share and collaborate and be a part of it. Doesn't mean you got to take on the whole work project. Doesn't mean you got to take everything over and it's all yours. But even take steps to get involved or engage with other coworkers and their work because you learn along the way as well, whether it's with your boss, whether it's other team members. You really learn when you spend time doing work outside of your work, and it really is helpful. But never do it to the extent where you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all this extra work and I'm not getting compensated for it, because that's absolutely not what we want to say. The other thing I'll also kind of mention when you think about where you spend your time and what you spend your time on, it's really important to think about what your goals are. What are your development opportunities? What's your sort of career lens, short term and long term? And make some choices. But if you feel that at the end of the day, you spent time doing all this managing up, and you feel like you've invested in the relationship, observing, really working on being adaptable, doing some scientific inquiry, all of those things, and it's not working, by all means, consider if it's the right time for you to, kind of adapt or adjust or change your situation. Like I pointed out in the beginning, one and two people are thinking about, their roles and what it is they want to do, and it's okay to do that too. But spend some time really investing and managing up. And then if you feel like you've spent that time, you've done your due diligence and it's still not working, then, meet with somebody and talk to somebody about what your options are and what to consider.
Another question. What type of conversation should I be having in one-on-ones to build relationships with my boss?
Mm, that's a really good question. I always say start light. Um, when I used to work with a lot of students, STEM students in particular, they always used to be leery of having conversations with faculty. And what do I talk about? I don't want to go to office hours, or I don't want to approach them about doing a research project. They're scary. And I would always say, ask them about their research, because folks love to talk about themselves. It's still true. Even when you're a leader, you still love to talk about yourself, right? You still love to share your passion, what motivates you, why you do what you do. So start there. Get some insight into your boss or your leader to figure out what motivates them, why they're interested in this work, why it's so important, what their priorities are, and then figure out where you fit into that. Figure out how, once you understand their priorities and goals and motivations, how the work you're doing is contributing to that, and how they see that intersection to make sure y'all are on the same page with it. I think there's also time and place to kind of get to know somebody beyond just the everyday work, but recognize it takes time to really ask those questions, to learn about, somebody's family, what they do outside that keeps them sort of balanced in different ways. And so start light, but continue to figure out what's of interest to you, and also what's of interest to your boss as you navigate one-on-one. But try one new question every single one-on-one. Doesn't have to be the whole list. Try one each time and see how it goes.
This will be our last question. How can employees manage up and stay indispensable amid job insecurity?
Yeah, that's a really powerful question, right? Recognizing there's so much of that. Um, it's never something that you do in a vacuum and really not recognize that there's so much else that's going on around you organizationally, team wise. In our sort of healthcare system, there's constant change. We've integrated with different health systems. You see folks come in and go on every single day. So I get it. I realize that, it's not always ideal to manage up and really take that time at this time. But if there's one or two things you can do and start doing, keep in mind it's not just about the current relationship and boss that you're really managing up for. You're managing up for your performance, your learning, and your career growth and development. So you're spending time doing things that will help you through what could be instability tomorrow as you work to get that next job and talk about, hey, here are the things I've developed, here's what I've worked on, and here's some of the progress I've made. So think about it as development and growth, and do what you can, where you can, when you can.
I love that. And I'll add a shameless plug in here. If anyone is expecting, anticipating that you might have a career gap, you might have a gap in your work history because of layoff or anything of that nature, if you're in that position right now, our career article in the fall issue of the Alum magazine is all about that, how to re-enter the workforce with some really great tips. And so we'll share that resource with you as well. All right. Rashonda has helped me through a lot of challenging points of my career, and I'm so happy that you all were able to benefit from her expertise. So please show her some love with your emojis and blue hearts and all of that. Thank you so much, Dr. Flint, for joining us today. You're welcome to connect with Dr. Flint on LinkedIn or in the information that Brooke has included in the chat. Um, Rashonda, thank you for your time. Please, everyone, remember that today's session was recorded. It will be sent to you via email. We have a link in the chat for you to give us some feedback. We want to know what you think so that we can continue making these webinars even better so that we can better serve you. And I'll end by saying thank you to everyone who's here with us today, and go Blue.